world of big bucks, there are three constants: food, cover, and does. If you want to find that huge buck in the fall, you better figure out a way to keep the ladies happy.
The does that live on your property, they are your best friends.
Hey guys, it's all about the girls.
I'm Steve Bartella.
I'm Gordy Cron.
I'm Mark Kaiser.
I'm Dan Schmidt, and this is Deer and Deer Hunting TV.
You can put in hours of work, create deer utopia, and offer everything a whitetail could want. But if you don't have the does, you're probably not seeing the bucks.
In recent years, if we've really been tracking management, it has been just pounded into our heads. You have to kill those, you have to kill those, you have to kill those. They've almost been made out to be the enemy. They are not. They are the buck hunter's best friends. Those does that live on your ground, they keep Mr. Big occupied there.
What you need to understand here is a doe's home range is much smaller than a buck's home range. So if you have a big mature doe on your property, especially if you have a small property, you want to leave her alone. If you're going to harvest some does, you're going to want to go after the younger age classes. Yearling does are perfect because they're going to disperse anyways. But if you have 3-4-year-old does, you're not going to know the age. You're just going to know you have a mature doe on your property. Leave her alone. She's going to be there. She's not going anywhere.
You know, it's not rocket science. If you're going to want to find the bucks in the fall, especially during the periods of the rut, you need to know where the does are. You need to hunt the does. It's not a lot different than those college bars. What's the first thing they do? They have ladies' night. They draw the ladies in. What happens? Then the guys come too. It's not a lot different with deer. You have to manage for does. You need to set up your stands for does, because where those does are, the bucks will follow.
If you're watching TV, it's just buck hunt after buck hunt after buck hunt. Frankly, when you see doe hunts, it's because they didn't kill enough bucks the year before. No, that's not reality. Reality is if you want to kill great bucks on your ground, you have to pay attention to those does. You pay attention to them, you give them everything they need, and the bucks fall into place. I manage ground as part of my living. You know, a dirty little secret? I don't focus on creating buck bedding. I don't focus on creating buck habitat. I focus on creating doe habitat, because if you create ideal doe habitat, the bucks fall in line. What do you need to get deer to spend a disproportionate amount of time on your ground? You supply them with the best food, the best cover, the best water, the best feeling of security and comfort and breeding opportunities that they can get within that overall area. They're going to spend a disproportionate amount of time on your ground. If you do that for does, the bucks fall into place. There's all sorts of information out there about going ahead and building doe factories. You know, if you do this wrong, you do that wrong, you'll have all these does, you won't have any bucks. You know what? That is pure, flat-out baloney. You give those does everything they want, you're giving Mr. Big everything he wants too.
Deer and Deer Hunting is brought to you by Hornady, accurate, deadly, dependable. Mossberg, built rugged, proudly American. Nikon, the next generation in hunting optics. Cuddyback, more deer, fewer blanks. And by Scent Killer Gold with Hunt Dry technology. Apply, dry it, and go hunt. Coming up next.
When you're talking to other land managers out there, reading the information, the resources, relying on them, what you hear over and over is bucks, 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 bucks. You cannot ignore the doe portion of the equation. You want to see big bucks this fall? You better keep the girls happy. You're watching Deer and Deer Hunting Television.
This segment of Deer and Deer Hunting is brought to you by Matthews. If you talk to a hunter, rarely do they say they are patterning their land for does, but that's exactly what you should be doing.
How do you prepare your land to have does on it and to keep does on it? It's food, cover, security. To keep them secure, how do you make them secure? Make them secure by leaving them alone, especially, again, if you have a small property. If you have 40 acres or less, you don't want to be pounding a lot of does off of there. You want to leave them alone. Get them a sanctuary within the middle of that property or somewhere that they're not going to wander off onto the neighbors and get shot during gun season.
I'm not a deer manager, I'm a deer hunter. I hunt mostly through observation. So when I'm scouting, when I'm in my stands, that's when I'm looking for does and I'm trying to figure out what the does are doing, where they're going. I'm doing this all through observation. So it's an ongoing process with me during the season. Since I'm not a land manager, I'm not out building things to draw deer in, I have to go out into my hunting areas and figure out what the deer are doing on their own.
You want a classic example of what a happy doe will do for your buck hunting? Here I've got a doe that is right on the edge of estrus. That's out on the edge of my food plot. Now, she is happy, she is healthy, and she smells just perfect. And there is this gorgeous 3.5-year-old 9-point that will not leave her alone. He is trying to corral her and keep her to himself. But you know what? She's not going where he wants her to. One of the bigger myths, everybody thinks that, man, when there's a doe in estrus, she's leading Mr. Big all over. You know what? Once Mr. Big has claimed that doe, that could not be further from the truth. It's actually the buck that's trying to push that doe into a location where he feels secure. Well, this girl doesn't want to go. So he's jumping at her and stomping at her, trying to get her to go in the direction he wants, and she won't move. So he must have spent 10 minutes dogging this doe right out in front of me. And the whole time I'm sitting there smiling, going like this because she smells right. And when she smells right, you can bet every buck that's not with a doe in the area that gets a downwind whiff, he's gonna come in and check this out. So that 4.5-year-old runt-bodied 10-point that smells her, he comes out and he decides he wants to steal this girl. And that 9-point and that 10-point, they go at it. I'm talking knockdown, roll, drag out, nasty fight. There was a couple times, quite honestly, that I almost shot up in the air just to break them apart. But the 9-point won. He went off with his doe, and that 10-point came back out again and gave me the perfect shot. That. He's got a 3.5-year-old body, he's got a 2.5-year-old rack. But frankly, I'm thrilled. He's just a good, solid deer, but he's never gonna amount to being just humongous. But if I had not been taking care of the girls, she wouldn't have been there, she wouldn't have smelled right, and she wouldn't have created that little feeding frenzy.
Up next.
All bets are off. It's time to put some meat in the freezer. We have a doe down. It's a glorious day, and we just got started.
You know, back in high school when the guy would do anything for the pretty girl? It's no different than with a buck. You're watching Deer and Deer Hunting TV. You know, I hear this a lot from people. They say, oh, my property only has a few bucks on it, or my property is only home to does. That's nonsense. your property is home to deer. If you have the right things in place, you're going to have deer. And if you have deer, you're going to have an equal proportion of bucks and does. You might not see them all the time, or you might be seeing does all the time because you're hunting it wrong.
When you're managing your land, you need to provide the nutrients, the food that'll draw these deer in. Draw them from the surrounding areas. Draw them in from your neighbors. It's all about putting the right banquet in front of the deer.
Well, here's a prime example of how it should work if you got everything going for you. This particular property, lots of deer, ample opportunities to fill some doe tags. And you know, don't be afraid, if you're gonna shoot some does while you're buck hunting, don't be afraid to do it out of the same stand. A doe is a doe if you're on that property, and if you're targeting the ones you want to target, the younger age classes, doesn't matter when you take them.
Opening day of Illinois gun season. It's a beautiful morning. It's cold, it's clear, no wind. We're looking over a nice food plot here. Looks good. First one. That's how you make venison in Illinois. Big, beautiful doe. It's first light. We haven't seen anything. She came in with a little buck. Isn't that pretty the way she's just trotting in the sunlight like that? You know what I love about gun season? All bets are off. It's time to put some meat in the freezer. We have a doe down. It's a glorious day. And we just got started.
If you set your property up to cover all your bases, then you're going to keep does on. There's no one thing that you can do to say, oh, I'm going to have more does bedding on my property or feeding on my property. It's a combination. Food plots, outer edges, good idea. It's going to draw those deer in. And then the inner edges of your property, have nice prime bedding areas if you can, and then stay out of there. If you have a small property, you're only hunting a small portion of that property throughout the year, and you're leaving the rest of that as utopia. Let the deer have that be their home.
Dan Schmidt is in Illinois. It's the start of the gun season, and he's already taken a nice doe.
That is a beautiful doe.
With the morning already a success, Dan decides from the don't change from what works philosophy to hunt the same stand in the evening. Shortly after getting into that stand, through the thick brush of central Illinois, Dan spots movement on the edge of a food plot. It's a beautiful 8-pointer, and it's coming directly toward Dan's stand.
Big, beautiful 8-pointer. Yes. The rut is absolutely rocking. Hang on a second.
A doe in the morning, a great buck in the afternoon. That's what great land management is all about. To get the boys to come out, you have to keep the ladies happy.
What a nice buck. Look at this. Is a dandy 8-pointer. Dandy 8-pointer.
He is pretty, holy mackerel. Nice tines. You know, that's exactly what we were here for. Just a really pretty 8-pointer. Holy cow. Yes.
Coming up next, perfecting your setup in growing big and what you should be doing right now to get ready for the season. This is Deer and Deer Hunting TV. Deer and Deer Hunting is brought to you by Thompson Center, America's master gunmakers. Analogics, protect your herd with the power of science. Get armed and deadly with Easton's FMJ arrows. And by 10-Point Crossbow Technologies. There is no substitute.
What we're going to talk about today are just 4 random tips that don't quite justify a show, but together, you know what, they can fill up a show. But each one of them, they're little things that can make a difference for us. Start out right off the bat, cam use. Treat those cams for odors before you set them out, and take odor control, at least when it comes to your hands and feet, seriously when you're swapping those chips. Okay, next, something that actually one of the viewers of the show figured out is you can use flagging tape. You can use flagging tape to go ahead and show what the wind direction is when these deer are entering the frame with these trail cameras. Just go ahead and take some flagging tape, hang it up back in the picture frame, and note which way the flagging tape is pointing when the deer's coming out. That can really help us in certain situations when it comes to, okay, Mr. Big is coming out on this plot sporadically, but we can't figure out if there's a key to whether or not there is a key, frankly, to when he comes out. Well, you know what? If you have that flagging tape and every single time that flagging tape is pointing like this, when he's standing there in frame, guess what? Next time the wind's like this, you might want to be hunting there. Next, we all have it stuck in our head that we have to create food plots that look like they belong on the cover of Farm Digest. Now, you know what? We don't. All we need is enough food in those locations to feed those deer. If we have that, we're happy. The deer are happy, we're happy. Okay, top seeding works really well in certain situations where you can't get equipment back in, or you want to go ahead and conserve as much soil moisture as you can by not turning the dirt. Now, what you do is you just get in there. Frost seeding clover works really well anywhere where you had an annual crop the year before that wasn't taken over by weeds. Now, those areas back in the woods that you can't get the equipment back in, if you can go ahead and do nothing more than throw the seeds down on the dirt, spray the weeds, you're going to go ahead and possibly create a thriving food plot. So now you're going ahead and killing the weeds, plus you're giving your food plot plants a nice little growth spurt. It actually even helps kill the weeds better because they absorb this fertilizer along with the chemicals. Ends up being a higher kill-off. But those 4 little tips there, no, they're not going to change the world for you, but you know what? They make a difference. And the more little difference makers we can stack together, the better off we are.
When talking about younger deer, did you know that fawns, yearlings, and 2.5-year-old bucks disperse on average 2 times by the time they hit that 2-year-old age mark? We know that through research that bucks will disperse an average of 2 times before their 2nd birthday. And how that helps you is where you see that young buck today, chances are he's not going to be anywhere near that 2 years from now. And that's good to know. But when we're talking about mature deer, the deer that you see near your hunting properties, they undergo changes starting in late August. In late August on your cutty back photos, you're going to see these bucks. They're going to be predictable. You can almost set your watch to where they're going to be any given morning, any given evening. It's very easy. It's not so easy as you get to September. About September 1st in most areas, that's when you see velvet peel. That's when you see bucks starting to break out of their bachelor groups. Now's when the fun begins as a hunter, because you might not know that deer that's there in September might not be there in October or definitely November, but deer you haven't seen before are going to start showing up. So that makes it a little bit more exciting, especially bow season. We're in September. We're out there with our Matthews. We're bow hunting. Pretty predictable deer behavior, especially in farm country. As we get later into September and even early October, I love to break out my 10-point and target some doe areas because, let's face it, I like to fill some doe tags and have some venison, but it also allows me to study deer behavior in other areas. But then as we get toward the rut, whether we're bow hunting in the Midwest or whether we're gun hunting in someplace else that allows rut hunting during the rut, that buck's behavior is going to change dramatically, and he's going to put on a lot more miles in search of does. After the rut, you get to the post-rut. We're talking about mostly late November, December, January in some southern states. Those post-rut bucks, they're in recovery mode. And that's important to know because recovery mode is completely different. It's coming back to circle. Those deer are coming back, not only to their home ranges,